the context. So let's take this, Ali. I'd like to hear from you your opinion about why it's important in the time of conflict, war conflict, or armed conflict. Doing research is an extra burden. And if we suffer to make people adhere to ethical standard in regular days, what sort of difficulties we should endure to make people adhere to those guidelines in time of war?
Okay, so here we're talking about a few things. First of all, let's start with a very basic question, and it's a genuine question. People are now affected by basically they are being bombarded or attacked, and they are fleeing their villages, fleeing their cities, looking for safety, looking for the basic needs. For us, the question of like, let's go do some research, but this is a really odd thing to do. What we expect is that we should be providing them with humanitarian work, the humanitarian aid. They need food. Let's give them food. That they need medicine. They need vaccines. They need clean water, which is absolutely common sense. However, it's really important to understand that the humanitarian system, the global humanitarian system, which is led by leading UN agencies, like, for example, like there's a so-called UN OCHA, which is basically the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. This is kind of like the central body under the United Nations to coordinate the work of the humanitarian work. And just to simplify, for those who are not familiar with the humanitarian system, it is divided into clusters. There's a cluster for health, cluster for education, cluster for protection, a cluster for logistics, and so on. Okay. For each of these clusters, there is a lead organization. For example, WHO, the World Health Organization, is the lead for the cluster of health. UNICEF, for example, for nutrition and education. The FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, is responsible for the food security. The World Food Program for the food security, and so on. So basically, and we're talking about like billions of dollars before the current cut by the current U.S. administration for the international aid. However, we're talking about quite a sophisticated system, and now this is only the UN agencies. Now there are many other players. For example, we have MSF, we have international organizations, the humanitarian agencies working in the field. So the question is, we cannot go to the field. Let's assume that I am an organization and I'm an agency. I want to help the people. I can't just go to the field with some food and some tents and start distributing them. One of the most important points that or the starting point that we need to do is the so-called needs assessment. We need to make sure that what the people need and what is the acceptable way and how much of this is needed. We cannot just assume that they need clothes, let's send clothes, or they need food, let's send food. It doesn't work like that. We have to have some sort of baseline to assess our intervention as well, and to make the budget allocation, given the high competition, if you wish, between different sectors. So to cut it short, so basically we need some baseline data for our humanitarian interventions. How do we do this data? But the needs assessment. Needs assessment in a way, among other issues. For example, if we want to be like research as a moral witness, and this is perhaps one of the things that I want to highlight as well, and this was fun in my project. When I will go an example from my project and come back to link them together. One of the things that I expected is that perhaps you refer to this in your question, is about research as a burden. For example, there are some statistics that certain villages have been studied for more than 30 times by 30 surveys, while other villages, because of the security, where they are inaccessible, they were not unsurveyed, which means that most of the aid or the help would go for those who are kind of like over researched. And what I had in mind, as a Western educated person, so when I went for a very individualistic Western kind of approach, and I have to admit that I looked at research as a burden, surveys as a burden. I have to a lot of questionnaires, a lot of points and this and that. However, when I went to the field, when I went to the people, I found a completely different story. They were welcoming research. They wanted someone to knock on their door to ask, "How are you today? How are you feeling today? What do you need?" So in a way, they shifted my view to from research from a mere academic boring exercise of collecting data into an act of solidarity. And so it goes beyond the logistic need of humanitarian work into something bigger, into an act of solidarity. And they were welcoming. I mean, for it's a well, overwhelming majority of the participants I interviewed in my work, they wanted more researchers to come. They wanted more agencies to ask them, which I found really interesting because I didn't look at it because as an academic researcher working in the boring stuff, which is basically just it's I'm collecting data, analyzing data, and publishing data, and that's it. Or to send it to the policymaker or to the agency to make their budget. But for the people, it was a completely different story. Okay, but obviously this was not almost always the case. There is other issues related to that. The second point is, or the other importance that I want to highlight for research is um, as an act of moral witness. In other words, we have to document what's happening. We don't want this to go forgotten. People, for example, using this of starvation as a weapon, which is against the which is it's a war crime. Okay, if we don't have the documentation of the level of starvation and the level of malnutrition among children, among the people affected by the armed conflicts, it will go forgotten. It's really important to understand this. And one of the examples, for example, it's again talking about at least example that I can provide is that the in Sudan, for instance, the previous president was prosecuted by the international by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, based on evidence collected from surveys. These surveys were sent to the United Nations Security Council and to the ICC, and this provided evidence that these people are being starved. Rape was used as a tool in this. So again, research is not just a matter of like data collection. It's about it's an act of solidarity and moral witness that we need to provide this data for hoping that one day that those who committed these crimes will be brought to justice.